Okay.
Hello, welcome. This is the second talk of the Mastery of Luck workshop, which I hope you will find also very interesting. One of the important things to be aware of, I have mentioned this, but I'll say it again, is definitions. And here we have Socrates, who thought that having your definitions very clear and understood is very important, and so do I. It's very important because, as I said in the first talk, your definitions can give you options on what you can do with a concept, and also will put limits to what you can do. So let's go to the next slide. That is success. So it's important to know, have a good understanding of success. So you need a concept that you can make use of, one that you can work with. So I'll give you a moment just to think what would be a good concept. Giving a description of someone being successful is not the same as having a definition. And that's why definitions are important. So here's the definition that I use. It's the completion of an intention. And all success is down to the completion of an intention. And when you have that definition, it gives you vast scope for spotting when you're successful and when you're not successful. And a lot of people aren't always very good at spotting the differences and when each of those occurs. Okay? So that's the definition that we'll be using in the Mastery of Luck. Alright? Another, this one you already have, luck. I've given you that one. Now here's the question. When you try and you fail, you get frustrated. If you keep trying the same thing again and again, thinking it should work and it doesn't, you get even more frustrated. You can end up kicking the computer or the car or whatever. Yes? Even more so because you did it repeatedly and you ended up frustrated. So the question is, what is it that would cause you to continually fail because you keep trying to do the same thing? You're trying to succeed at something and you don't do it. You can't do it. Yes? And that's an important factor in the Mastery of Luck. So here I have a question for you. There are three people, and that's a samurai swordsmith, a very expert salesperson, and a meringue chef who whips up the egg white to make it all frothy. Now what do all three have in common? They have a lot in common, we know, because they're professionals, they're skillful, but there's one thing in particular that is very important that they have to know, that they have in common. And usually when I ask people, unless they've been to my workshops before, nobody actually gets this. So I do end up telling them, okay? All right. And this big important thing that can avoid repeated failures, and it's knowing when to stop. If you don't stop when you're whipping up the meringue, it'll go flat. The swordsmith, he beats the metal out, it stretches out, he folds it over, he does it again. He has to keep doing this, and the sword and the metal gets tougher and better. If he does it too many times, the metal goes weak. And the salesperson, if a person starts to sell and he convinces the person but he doesn't recognize that he has, he'll try and continue to convince the person, and now it'll go pear-shaped. And that happens so much in people's lives, in relationships and everything. They don't realize when they have actually achieved a success. And if you don't realize, you're going to try and carry on, and it will go pear-shaped. And then the more you try, the worse it will get. So that rule, never give up. No, you should give up on this one, because it's going to get worse. When you do that, the word we could use, there may be others, overrun. And that means going past the point at which you should stop. Now you could say, well, why can't a person keep on doing something for quite a long while? Actually, everything in life, every action, everything that goes on has its natural completion point. When you don't recognize a completion point and you carry on, you mess things up completely. So I'm going to give you some examples of when people do this. There's the obvious thing that people know about, like cooking, get your timing right, and all sorts of things. And there are expressions such as don't over egg the pudding, and there are other ones, over the top, that's another expression. Yeah. So there are a few expressions. What people don't realise is this area goes very deep, and it's has a very wide remit. It covers so many areas in everyday life, knowing when to stop. Now, there's very few things in life that potentially, at least scientifically, are impossible eventually, but there is one thing, and that is when you overrun, carrying on, still trying to succeed. So why is this a problem? Well, let me give you a few more examples of overrun. You can be having a row with somebody, a disagreement, and you get some kind of agreement, and instead of letting it go at that point, you carry on trying to convince, and then it will go pear-shaped. I had a friend once, he did counselling, and he used one of the principles that I use, that there's a natural end point for a session, and you should spot the end point and then stop. And he used that in session, and he did okay. What he didn't realise was how much in everyday life you have to be aware of when to stop. And he would have some disagreement, say, with his young daughter, and he would get agreement, maybe grudgingly, but she would agree. And what does he do? He has to say something else. He has to add something. He has to have the last word, and she just said okay. It goes wrong. And now, because it's gone wrong again, he'll say a lot more words. And it gets worse and worse and worse, and you end up with a bad atmosphere, and there's nothing you can do about it. Normally you do about it, other than forget about it for a while and let things calm down. Yeah. But this is so important. This is what happens when you go into an overrun. And I've seen it so many times in various ways that you have this overrun. You can have an athlete who will train. Now, a few decades ago, they would train all year round. They've now realised, the last few decades, that you don't do that. You try to reach your peak of fitness that is obtainable for you, and then you give it a rest. So in the winter, very often, if it's a summer sport, you have a rest, and they found that the best way. I remember in 1962 there was a fight, a heavyweight boxing champion, and this was between Muhammad Ali and Archie Moore. Archie Moore was the light heavyweight champion. In other words, he's a very good boxer, but he wasn't expected to win because he was outclassed in terms of weight. And people did expect him, though, to put up quite a good fight. He actually put up a rather poor fight. He was disappointed in his performance. And I saw him being interviewed quite a while afterwards, actually. And he said, I never trained so hard for a fight in my life. And at that point I knew what was wrong. He'd overrun. Making that statement made me realise that he probably reached his end point for training. And all he should have done at that point was just try and maintain it. But because Muhammad Ali is so brilliant as a boxer, he kind of thought more, and he carried on training. He went into an overrun. And what he said next in this TV interview confirmed it for me. He actually said, the moment I stepped into the ring, my legs felt like lead. Well, yeah, that's typical overrun. Your legs are supposed to get heavy near the end of the fight, not at the beginning. Yeah. But if you're in overrun, and this is a physical action that you're involved in, your body will go weak. You get suddenly tired. This kind of thing can happen. Yeah. And I did come across an article by a scientist. He was a marathon runner. And he was running this marathon in South Africa, I think. And he thought he was within about a quarter mile of the end point. And he turned the corner expecting to see the end point, and it was much further on. But it was already in his mind that that was the end point. He said the moment he turned the corner and saw this extra mile that he had to run, all the strength went out of his leg. Well, this is how the mind can affect the body. Yeah. And as the bodybuilder Ernie once said, it's all in the mind. That the mind gives up on your strength before your muscles do. And that's probably a very good setup actually, because evolutionary wise, you've chased the antelope down, you're feeling quite exhausted, feel you can't run anymore, but you've caught your antelope, and just as you're congratulating yourself, a lion comes out of the wood. And what do? You run for the nearest tree. Why? Because you've got a reserve of energy that you were never able to normally access. That's evolutionary safety net, if you like. Yeah. So it's always there. Yeah. So it's the mind will switch off the ability of the muscles to work. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's another area, and that's where you're involved in a physical action. The consequence you'll get is something like that. If, for instance, you were training and you want to run 1,500 meters in under 4 minutes, and it's just training, it's not a competition, and you time yourself, and you're getting pretty close to doing it under 4 minutes, and one day you run around the track, and you look at your stopwatch expecting it to be under 4 minutes because you felt very good running and knew you'd done very well. And what does it say? It says 4 minutes, 3 seconds. Oh, failure. So you are disappointed. Never mind, try again next time. You go out next day, your legs will lose their energy halfway round. Why? Your subconscious knows you have already done it in under 4 minutes. You are still trying to do it for the first time. Your intention is to run 1,500 meters for the first time under 4 minutes, and you're still holding on to that intention. You can't do that. You've already done it. So you can't run it for the first time. You can't, in your conscious mind, you're trying to do it for the first time. You can't. It's already been done. You could run it for a second time, but you don't know that. So this is like you have this intention, you think, to climb Mount Everest for the first time, but you don't know you actually did it the week before or something, except it was a different mountain than what you thought. So now you're trying to do it for the first time, it doesn't work. And you're in a hiding to nothing. Yeah. And this happens everywhere. In relationships, happens all sorts of activities. If the activity you're involved in is very mental, you're studying something and you overrun your ability to focus and pay attention and remember what you've read or studied, that will disappear. Yeah. At one time I used to give myself a little target on reading something, and I'll get to the end of that chapter. And of course I might get tired if it was late in the evening, or I'm going past my attention span. And I push on to the end, but then I get to the end and I can't remember very much. So I read it again. Oh no, I don't do that anymore. No. If I'm reading, I'm studying, and all of a sudden I realise I've hit a win, I've completed it, or I've used up my attention span, I stop. Now it might be that my attention span can be revived with a cup of tea. It might be I can just look out the window, get some space, and then I'm okay. Or I might need a longer rest before I can rehabilitate my attention span. But I learn now I don't push on past. It doesn't work. So you've got mental effects where you overrun, you've got physical effects where you overrun. You also got there's another area which I could call events. You have an event in your life and you succeed at something, but you don't realise you've succeeded, and you get into an overrun. And for instance, you go to the bank manager. Nowadays you get loans easily with credit cards, but in the 60s, early 70s, there were no credit cards. And getting a loan from your bank manager was difficult. And I went at one time to get a loan. And at first he said yes. And I must have said too much and talked too much. And then he changed his mind. So I didn't get the loan. I handled it another way later, but anyway. So you can ask your bank manager for a loan, and at first you don't get it, or you do get it rather, and then you overrun, now you've lost it. You can ask your boss for a rise. If you don't spot when he's agreed, he'll probably say something extra, and you'll change his mind. And it happens everywhere. Mm-hmm. How I first came across this, I was driving from Hampstead, London. I was driving out to another small town quite a few times every week. And yeah, it was quite a good ride. I'm driving, it's quite a few miles. And around that time, I'd come across a Victorian delicacy. I'm sorry if I upset you here, but this Victorian delicacy recipe was an omelette, but a special kind of omelette. It was a brain omelette made from brains and eggs, which sounds awful, particularly I hardly ever eat meat now anyway. So I checked in with some butchers, and no butchers was selling brains. This was before mad cow disease, thank God. And I thought, oh well, I'll have to put out a little intention into the universe that I serendipity, I come across brains. And it so happens that not too long afterwards, I am driving through a small village. I notice a small butcher's, and the thought comes into my mind, in there were some brains. So I pull the car over, I walk in there, and I said to the butcher, do you have any brains? And he said no. I thought, well, maybe he doesn't, but the shop does. And up on the wall was some sheep's head. So I pointed to them, and then he had this realisation that he did have brains. And he went out the back and he came back with two small sheep brains, and charged me 4p each. He didn't value brains very much, I guess. And said, if you come in on Thursday, I'll have some more for you. This was a Tuesday. Thursday comes, I'm driving through, but I'm a little late and I can't really be bothered to stop. So I carry on, I think I'll go tomorrow. Something happens tomorrow and I can't get there. This went on every time. Something was getting in my way, I couldn't get back to the butcher's shop. one day I even thought, definitely I'm going this time. I get in my car to drive back to London, and a friend knocks on the window, can you give me a lift back to London? Yeah, get in. He lives near me. We get in the car, and then he says, oh, I need to go so-and-so, and it was a roundabout route, so I missed the butchers. I couldn't believe this, all these coincidences. Eventually I got there. I think it was 2 or 3 months later. So I stop the car, I walk over to the butcher's, the shop's closed down. I thought, I don't believe this, something's going on. What is this? And that's when I began to realise that there is this kind of luck factor. And if you overrun, your luck goes sour on that ambition. And I started to pay attention to it. Yeah. And I realised how much things like that occur in everyday life. There was another example I came across. I was giving a talk with other people at a conference that we held every year in Wembley, and it was at a hotel. During the lunch break, the hotel provided lunch, and we sat opposite each other in long rows of tables. And I noticed to my left there were two friends. They didn't know each other very well. They knew each other a little bit, having met at the conference, but not really knowing each other very well. So sitting opposite each other, it was natural to get involved in a conversation. So they ended up talking about Palestine. Okay, but then it became obvious that they weren't in agreement. I thought, oh, that's going to be interesting. And they carry on talking, and you could see they weren't going to agree. Now, at a certain point in the conversation, it paused. They didn't say anything for a little while. I thought that is the natural end point of that conversation. The end point they've reached is agree to disagree. They've exchanged views, each now understands the other person. They also realise that neither one is going to change their mind. They should have left at that point. And maybe at an intuitive level they knew that, so that's why the conversation naturally came to a stop. But at a level they didn't realise that. Maybe they both had an agenda, they needed to convince the other person, and that clouded their intuition, so their natural response is to change the conversation if something else didn't occur. So the conversation started up again. I thought, this is going to go pear-shaped. And it did. And they ended up in disagreement and disliking each other, and I don't think they were ever friends again after that. And I thought, yeah, this is what happens. Yeah. If you're not sensitive to the fact that everything in life has a start, continuation, and a completion, that's where you end up. So, as I say, overrun makes everything impossible. There is a way out of it, but it's not by persevering, doing what you're already doing. Like they say about what's stupidity? Well, it's continuing to do the same thing, hoping for a different result. So you can handle it, and there is a technique for handling that I have worked out. And with that technique, you have to realise that you have had a success. You have to spot that you have succeeded. Now, if you were handling everything perfectly, when you do realise that, how would you feel? Pretty good. Yeah, you'd feel elation, wouldn't you? Now, having succeeded at something, you have to acknowledge it, that you have concluded that you've won. But that's not a case of intellectually saying to yourself, oh, yeah, I succeeded. No, you've got to feel it. That's where it counts. Feel it. Which means either high elation if it's a big win, or just satisfaction if it's a small win. But either way, it's feeling better. You've got to feel that. That is what will end the cycle of action. And then you can go on and do something else, or you can climb Mount Everest for a second time, whatever. Yeah. And so in order to rehabilitate this, because what's happened is, if you do that and you don't acknowledge it, the next time you try to do it, it won't work. You may not remember, but your subconscious will, your intuition will, and it will not go right. You end up, in effect, in a rut. You're stuck in this rut now. And if you do that a lot in your life, in the end you'll get into an attitude of things don't go, I'm not very lucky, things don't go well for me. And that will predispose you to not recognizing a win when you do get a win. And then you'll get frustrated, you'll get disgruntled, you're very unhappy, and you'll look at other people and think, why does everything come so easy for them and it's so difficult for me? Well, the reason is they didn't get into one of these ruts. You've got stuck into it, so now you tend to anticipate it. Whereas the other person, oh yeah, they want to go on a holiday somewhere and everything falls into place and they do it. So it's like, in a way, the problem is that things come very easy, really. But they can come so easy, you don't believe it. And if you don't believe it, you overrun. And now you're in trouble. So it's very important to spot these wins. I had one very interesting case. Somebody came to me for counselling. He was about 20 years old. So he comes, he sits down, I want to know what his problem is. He says, well, I've never had a girlfriend. Now, there was nothing particularly physically wrong with him. He didn't have bad breath. I mean, 20-year-old, how come he's never had a girlfriend? So, okay, so what exactly is the problem here? Okay, well, I go back to definition, don't I? Okay. How do you get a girlfriend? Well, the usual term in English is chat a girl up. Okay, so let's chat a girl up. Okay, but what's the definition of chat a girl up? What exactly does that mean? Well, it means that you talk to them and you try to get them to such a mood or attitude towards you that if you ask them for a date, they would say yes. That's chatting a girl out. Yeah, that's the game. But it's important to know when you've done it and when you haven't done it. So I thought, well, maybe this guy has got himself into an overrun. In other words, he had a success in the past, never recognised it, and now he's in the rut. Okay. I got him to recall earlier times that he had tried to chat somebody up. And eventually we got back to the first time that he actually overran. And it was very interesting. I got him to really examine it, and he realised that he actually had succeeded. He had chatted to the girl, they were getting on fine, and at that moment he should have asked for a date. But maybe through lack of confidence or whatever, he didn't do it. So now what happens? The next time he tries to chat a girl up, whether it's her or another girl, he's running on that intention to succeed for the first time. And he can't do it. He's already done it. He consciously doesn't know it, but his subconscious knows, his intuition knows. So I got him to look at this. I said, you have to get the elation for having had that success. All right, you didn't take advantage of it afterwards, but the fact is you did succeed. You need to to do that, you need to get that elation. So he looked at it, he realised, yes, he had actually succeeded, and he got the elation. I said, you need to do that because that will undo the overrun. That's the only way you you undo an overrun. So he did it, he was feeling at least good about that, and he went home. He phoned me 10 o'clock that night and said, something quite curious has happened. I said, what's that? He said, there's this girl I've been wanting a date with and never managed it. She phoned me. I said, yeah, that's the kind of thing, that's how your luck can change when you overdo an overrun. In that area which you've had for a long time no success, you overdo that overrun, everything falls into place. It's quite miraculous. Yeah. So it's such an important area, overrun. That, by the way, is some symptoms of what happens when you have an overrun. So as I say, there are basically 3 areas. There's the mental area where you can get sleepy, you can go unconscious, it's hard to keep awake. You can get the other one where, because you're involved in the physical activity, your muscles go weak or something like that. And then you have the other area, which is the more esoteric in a way, and that is synchronicities and that kind of thing, luck if you like, and that's to do with events. So it's important. The first time I really got into this area and I looked at it, I thought, oh my God, and I looked back in my memory and I thought, I spotted the times that I'd overrun something and never succeeded. Oh my God, you couldn't believe it actually, yeah. So an exercise for you would be to go back in your mind and try and spot all the times that you actually succeeded and you never fully realised, and then give yourself the elation. And then don't worry about it too much. Yeah. And if it doesn't seem to quite work, maybe there's an even earlier time that you didn't recognise it. You have to get the very first one, really. Otherwise that first one can trip you up. Okay? So I hope you'll find that these ideas useful. Yeah, it can change your life in certain areas, can't it? So that's my second talk for Mastery of Life. So I wish you success with that. Thank you.